Okie dokie.
You didn't give me a cord.
Oh, I didn't give you a chord. I'm trying to pick up the pace. It's a balance. I know so much of this stuff is review for everybody in here. I'm just consistently trying to tie together and bring the Brit alive in. We can see it in Torah all the time. All the time we can see it. And that's going to be key as we share with our friends, or even get those discussions open. So today we're going to highlight selected scriptures between Exodus 21 and 24. And we're going to focus on covenant and servanthood. I wrestled there's several different ways this could have gone. We're at the base of the mountain again, or still, and Moses has gone up and got instructions, and he's come down, and there's been some dialogue back and forth. We'll pick up, I want to pick up in Exodus 19, just to get us back on track here because there was something that was said in Exodus 19 that I want to bring together here. In verse 3 of Exodus 19, Moses went up to Yah, Elohim, and Yah called him from the mountain and said, "Thus you shall say to the house of Jacob and tell the children of Israel." Again, that's who he's talking to, his family, right? "You have seen what I did to the Egyptians, and how I bore you on eagle's wings and brought you to myself. Now therefore, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be a special treasure to me above all people, for all the earth is mine." And in verse 6, "And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the children of Israel." That's what Yah's telling them. Okay, now keep my covenant. We are before let me not go down there. Verse 7. "So Moses came and called the elders of the people and laid before them all those words which Yah commanded him. Then all the people answered together and said, 'All that Yah has spoken, we will do.' So Moses brought back the words of the people to Yah." So he's trucking up and down the mountain. And in verse 9 here it says, "And Yah said to Moses, Behold, I come to you in a thick cloud, that the people may hear when I speak with you, and believe forever." So Moses told the words of the people to Yah. So Yah's coming in and he's going to speak so that everybody present can hear, and they're going to believe forever and know that Moses is actually getting instructions from someone. Okay? So paraphrase, it's kind of like, you hear me now, but I'm going to speak to all the children of Israel so that they can hear me too. And I'm going to do that so that the children of Israel will believe you forever. And today, we're still studying the things that Moses wrote down because of this, right? Remember what Yah told Moses earlier in Exodus 4, verses 14 through 17, when Moses was asking Yah to send someone else. Remember that? Mm-hmm. I don't want to go, you send somebody else. And in verse 15 he says, "Now you shall speak to him, Aaron, and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and with his mouth, and I will teach you what you shall do." In verse 16, So he shall be your spokesperson to the people, and he himself shall be as a mouth to you, and you shall be to him as Elohim. Yah declared Moses his ambassador, or his earthly representation, or the image of the invisible Elohim to his people. He was how Yah communicated with his people, so that they could communicate with a man, another being like them. He did it that way. That's okay. And in chapter 7 of Exodus, if you remember, I didn't include it in here, but he did the same thing for Pharaoh and the Egyptians. Not only for the children of Israel, but Moses was that representative to all the people of Egypt too. Exodus 4:28. So Moses told Aaron all of the words of Yah, who had sent him, and all of the signs which he commanded. And then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together the elders and the children of Israel. So they got all the leaders together. And remember, the elders were the priests of the family before that got changed, right? The leaders in the, correct, David? Am I correct?
To some degree, yeah.
Okay, and just a summary of that, okay? And then Moses and Aaron went and gathered together all the elders and the children of Israel. And Aaron spoke all the words which Yah had spoken to Moses, and he did the signs in the sight of the people. So the people believed when they heard that Yah had visited the children of Israel, and that he looked on their affliction, and they bowed their heads and they worshipped. Now, they believed when they saw the signs, but what happened when the persecution came? Somebody got a wrong number there, Moses. All right, back to the base of the mountain. Until this point, Moses had been the only one that heard Yah's voice, with the exception of Yah telling Aaron to go out in the desert and find Moses. Okay? But that's about to change. In Exodus 20, verse 1, Elohim spoke these words, saying, and in Exodus 1 through 17, we know that's the 10 Commandments or the 10 words. But we're going to jump down to Exodus 20, verse 18. Now all the people witnessed the thunderings and the lightnings, the sound of the trumpet, and the mountain smoking. And when the people saw it, they trembled and stood far off. Verse 19. And they said to Moses, you speak with us, and we will hear you, but let not Elohim speak with us, lest we die. It was frightening for them. But isn't that what Yah told Moses he was going to do? Right? But Moses, he turns around and says, Moses says to the people, do not fear, for Elohim has come to test you, and that his fear may be before you, so that you may not sin. And so the people stood afar off, but Moses drew near the thick darkness where Elohim was. Verse 22. And then Elohim said to Moses, thus you shall say to the children of Israel, you have seen what I have talked with, you have seen that I have talked with you from heaven. Now the children of Israel have heard for themselves that Yah speaks from heaven. The people opted out of hearing directly from Yah. They wanted to go through Moses. They thought that was a good idea. So Moses goes on to tell the children of Israel the judgments that Yah sets before them in Exodus 21 through 24. These judgments reveal the responsibilities of a person within the family of Yah as a servant of Elohim. These are the responsibilities. And as you read through there, you're going to see responsibilities to your servants, responsibilities to about the animals, about digging holes. You are responsible. Not only you're expected to be responsible within a community, and it does include your enemies. It says in that passage that if the donkey of someone that hates you is down, you don't want to help him. You still have to help him. That's the deal. Now, if you want to do a really good study, and glean from that and see another parallel, go ahead and read 21 through 24 in a sitting, and then turn around and read what Yeshua said in Matthew 5 through Matthew 7, what we commonly refer to as the Sermon on the Mount. Okay? You'll see similarities, and Matthew 5:17 and 18 might read a little different to you, because laying Exodus 21 through 24 beside that Matthew passage, it'll reveal a little more context. They are parallel. I can remember when I first was beginning to walk, one of the things that I was told was, this is not a picture of the church, this Exodus thing, right? It's not a picture of the church. It's not. It looks like it's parallel in some cases, but it's not. It's parallel. There's a lot happening here. Now, if you're reading Matthew 5 through 7 with Exodus in mind at the mountain, this reads a little different. Do not think that I came to destroy the law of the prophets. I did not come to destroy, but to fulfill. For assuredly I say to you, until heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or tittle will by no means pass from the law till all is fulfilled. All right, so turn to Exodus 21, verse 1. Exodus 21, verse 1. This kind of struck me, it surprised me a little bit as I was reading through this. I won't say surprised. A lot of times when I'm reading through the scripture, I will ask questions. Sometimes I write them down. Sometimes I just log them mentally. I wonder why that's phrased like that. And sometimes that could bounce around in my head for months before, or maybe even years before I get an answer to that. But the way I read something, I read it a little bit different, and it comes to my attention. Why is that in that order? Okay? So in Exodus 21:1, now these are the judgments which you shall set before them. And it says, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve 6 years, and in the 7th he shall go out free and pay nothing. And if he comes in by himself, he shall go out by himself. And if he comes in married, then his wife shall go out with him. And I thought, why did he start with servants? If you buy a Hebrew servant, did he just purchase a group of people, bringing them out of Egypt? Hey, maybe that's why he did that. If you remember from Paul's writing, Paul flat out tells us, you were bought at a price. You're not your own. He expects us to be a servant to him. And the guy we talked about last week expects us to be a servant to him. And he's got a lot of shiny distractions that he puts up in front of us all the time. So, if you buy a Hebrew servant, he shall serve for 6 years, and the 7th year he shall go out free and pay nothing. And then if he comes in by himself, he goes out. If he comes in married, he gets to take his wife with him. Verse 4 says, if his master has given him a wife, and she has borne him sons or daughters, the wife and her children shall be the master's, and he shall go out by himself. But if the servant plainly says, I love my master, my wife, and my children, I will not go free. Then the master shall bring him to the judges, and he shall also bring him to the door, or to the doorpost, and his master shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he shall serve him forever. So that makes him a forever servant. Okay? Some of the writers of the New Testament referred to that as a bondservant. They decided that they were going to serve him forever. And that's what we're doing. right? Interesting that it is the master that shall pierce his ear with an awl, and he will serve him forever. Now that's the physical description of what happened back then. What do you think a spiritual ear piercing would look like? Think about that for a minute. Okay? The one that chose to serve the master forever had his ear pierced with an awl. The spiritual ear piercing. I'm going to present a case that a spiritual ear piercing pierces an ear that can't hear to allow it to hear. Okay? The light came on, huh? All right. If you turn to Deuteronomy 29, verse 2, I'm just pointing out here that about ears to hear and eyes to see. This is the end of Moses' writing. He knows he's not going into the land. And he's given the people his last instructions. In verse 2 it says, Moses called all Israel and said to them, you have seen all that Yah did before your eyes in the land of Egypt, to Pharaoh and to all his servants and to all his land. The great trials which your eyes have seen, the signs and those great wonders. Yet Yah has not given you a heart to perceive and eyes to see and ears to hear to this very day. Where does that stuff come from? Eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to perceive comes from Yah, doesn't it? It comes from Yah. They're given by Yah. Now, if you bounce over to Isaiah, you don't have to turn there. Isaiah 6, 9, and 10. The prophet says, Yah says to the prophet, go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Verse 10. Make the heart of these people dull and their ears heavy. They shut their eyes and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return and be healed. Now, why would I pull that out? Well, I pulled that out as a drive-by as we're going from Exodus, because I want you to go to, well, first let's talk about this. Who was Isaiah the prophet? Who was he a prophet to?
Judah?
Yes, he was a prophet to Judah. Now, my research tells me that he was a prophet between 742 BC-ish when Uzziah died. And he was a prophet during the reigns of King Jotham, Ahaz, Hezekiah, and Manasseh. He was there for a while. Okay? Now, go ahead and turn to Matthew 13 with me, and we'll pick it up in that passage, because Yeshua quoted that Isaiah passage in Matthew 13. Again, stuff you're all familiar with, but I'm just lacing it together maybe like you haven't seen it before. Matthew 13, verse 10. And the disciples came to him and said, why do you speak to them in parables? Is this ringing a bell to anybody? It's the parable of the sower and the seed, right? Why do you speak to them in parables? And he answered and said to them, because it has been given to you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it has not been given. For whoever has, to him more will be given, and he will have an abundance. But whoever does not have, even what he has will be taken away from him. Therefore, in verse 13, I speak to them in parables, because seeing they do not see, and hearing they do not hear, nor understand. Verse 14, And in them the prophecy of Isaiah is fulfilled, which says, hearing you will hear and shall not understand, and seeing you will see and shall not perceive. Verse 15. For the hearts of these people have grown dull, and their ears are hard of hearing. For their eyes have closed, lest they should see with their eyes and hear with their ears, lest they should understand with their hearts, so that he would heal them. You know, just at hearts and turn, so that he would heal them. Verse 16. But blessed are your eyes, for they see, and for your ears, for they hear. For assuredly, I say to you that many prophets and righteous men desired to see what you see and did not see it, and to hear what you hear and did not hear it. They were talking about it. They were saying it was coming. But the apostles, the disciples of Yeshua, got to see it taking place and hear what was going on. Now I want you to look at the number of times that Yeshua speaks directly to those that have been given ears to hear. And look at the number of times Yeshua speaks to the crowds, but specifically calls out those that have ears to hear. This is going to put a little bit more context for when you're reading through it again and you say, when you come across he who has ear to hear, I hope it ties back for you to Exodus and it continues on. Now, I chose John 10:1 to start. John 10 is Yeshua saying he's the good shepherd. Okay? And I've shared with you before, I believe that's the answer to what Ezekiel prophesies in Ezekiel 34. When he talks about the leaders doing the sheep bad and the sheep themselves doing the sheep bad. And he says he's going to send a good shepherd. This is the good shepherd. Okay? Yeshua said, most assuredly I say to you, he who does not enter the sheepfold by the door, but climbs up some other way, the same is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. Verse 3. To him the doorkeeper opens, and guess what? The sheep hear his voice. And he calls his own sheep by name, and he leads them out. Verse 4. And when he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them, and the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. Now jump down to verse 8. All who ever came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. And then jump down to verse 16. And other sheep I have that are not of this fold. Them also I must bring, and they will hear my voice. And there will be one flock and one shepherd. Okay? Now turn to Mark 7, verse 14. This is probably going to be quick. This is going to be a quick one today. Mark 7, verse 14. When he had called the multitudes to himself, he said to them, hear me, everyone, and understand. Verse 15. There is nothing that enters a man from outside which can defile him, but the things which come out of him, those are the things that defile a man. And then in verse 16, if anyone has ears to hear, let him hear. You see what he's calling out there? He knows some of them in that crowd have ears to hear. He also knows not all of them do. But the ones that have ears to hear are going to hear his voice. Mm-hmm. He's not just saying, hey, anybody out there with 2 ears, listen up. Anyone that has been given the ability to hear, that he talked about in the parable, okay, that's who he's talking to in here. He's saying, anybody that has an ear to hear, listen to what I'm saying. There's something in here. Now we're going to bounce over to Hebrews 3, 7, and 8. And that says, therefore, as the Holy Spirit says, today, if you will hear his voice, do not harden your hearts as in the rebellion in the day of trial in the wilderness. You know, so many references to Israel in the wilderness are found in the New Testament, in the Brit, okay? It's foundational. It's fundamental. It's the focus. That's the mindset. The thought of the law going away never even came up with the disciples at that time. And then, of course, we got the letters to the churches in Revelation 2 and 3, the letters to the congregation. Every one of the letters that's written, at the end of the letter, look at what he says. Revelation 2, verse 7. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give to eat of the tree of life, which is in the midst of the paradise of Elohim. So, this alludes, number one, it's all of the congregations. This was written, I didn't write down which ones, this is Ephesians. This was written to the congregation in Ephesus. But read what the Spirit says to all the congregations. Okay? To him who overcomes. We can hear, but we still have to overcome. How do we overcome? John says, through our faith, we overcome. And through putting aside of the flesh. Revelation 2:11. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. He who overcomes, again, shall not be hurt by the second death. Overcomes, again. 2:17. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. To him who overcomes, I will give some of the hidden manna to eat, and I will give him a white stone, and on the stone a new name, which is written, which no one except him who receives it. No one knows except him who receives it. Verse 29, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. 3:6, he who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. You get the picture. He wants us, that he's given the ability to hear, not only to hear, but to overcome. Verse Revelation 3:22, same thing. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And then in chapter 13, verse 9, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. It comes up over and over and over again. Yeshua knows not everybody that's listening is going to hear. Now think back to the base of the mountain. Moses had heard from Yah. Moses gave Yah's people the instructions. Yeshua gave what's often referred to as a Sermon on the Mount. He spoke those instructions to his disciples in Matthew 5 through 7. He closes that passage out with these instructions. In Matthew 7, starting in verse 24. Therefore, whoever hears these sayings of mine and does them, I will liken him to a wise man who built his house on a rock. Verse 25. And when the rain descended, and the floods came forth, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it did not fall, for it was founded on the rock. So he hears those sayings of mine, and he does them. That's how we overcome, through our faith. We hear those sayings and we do them. It's the obedience thing, right? And remember what was said at the base of the mountain. All that Yah has said we will do. That didn't last very long. And it happens with us as well. You know? Verse 26. But everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain descends, and the flood came, and the winds blew and beat on that house, and it fell, and great was its fall. They heard what he said, but they didn't do it. And it cost them. Great was the fall. Verse 28. And so it was when Yeshua had ended these sayings that the people were astonished at his teaching. Now this is going to tie back to Moses as well at the mountain. Look at verse 29. For he taught them as one having authority, not as the scribes. You know why he taught like he had authority? Because he had authority. You know, when John the Baptist began baptizing, the Pharisees came over and says, Are you the Messiah? No. Are you the prophet? What prophet? What prophet were they talking about? The one that Moses said was going to be like him, right? And I think it's Deuteronomy 18, I think, right? Where Moses said that God's going to send a prophet. Yeah. Okay. There he is. And he's teaching like one having authority and not the scribes. They do tie together. James 1:22 tells us to be doers of the word and not hearers only, deceiving ourselves. So James goes a little farther. You know, I mean, Yeshua said the same thing without using the word deceiving, the phrase deceiving yourself. But James comes right out and says it. If we hear what Yah's telling us and we don't do it, we're deceiving ourselves. And I'm not going to look for a show of hands, but you can go through a day or a week, or I find myself getting checked on not doing what he told me to do, you know. Trying not to get riled. I got riled up the other day in an instant because I had another one of those solicitors come up to the door. And there's been like 4 or 5 of them from same company, from SCE, coming up and wanting to talk about, you know. And you can only tell them no so many times before you have to be like less than polite, right? And they'll just keep going, right? I need to work on that. Maybe that's why he keeps sending these guys. Maybe that's why as I'm sitting here thinking, maybe that's why he keeps sending these guys. Because I got my dander up a little.
He's preparing you for Medicaid.
Okay, all right.
Medicaid.
Yeah.
And the frustration involved in that.
What's that?
What did they ask you?
They want me to buy a solar system. Because here's a shock. They expect SCE to raise the prices. Yeah. Today ends in a Y, doesn't it? Yeah, they're going to raise the prices. All right. I went through that very fast. I'm going to give you a bunch more time back. Does anybody have any questions or comments, or do you see how they do tie together? That was like, we went through like 50 slides. I just went booking through it.
That works.
Any comments? Did it make sense? Okay. All right. And I just I like to bring them together every time I see it because it's only one story. I say it over and over again. All right. Well, now it's time to.
Prepare our hearts to receive the blessing.
All right.